Yeah. Okay, just sitting. That's why. The microphone is here. I have to use this microphone.
Yeah.
Okay. So welcome to this new series of our center after a while. So there was a break during the summertime, the holidays and other stuff. So and after this period, we thought maybe we are a little bit bored of seminars, that the people come and say, "Oh, look, I'm so good, I did this and that." But then we don't. Usually, the discussion is a little bit, compressed, And then we say, "Oh, maybe did I learn something of all this story? Did I heard something new? That all my old story." So we thought maybe we can try, but this is try. So we don't know if it will be successful or not. With this challenge, the audience that we start today. And I'm very happy that Giovanni, that is our first speaker, accepted this invitation. Actually, it was, he's very brave because we didn't know in person. We just knew by messages and collaboration and so on. He doesn't know so much about us, but he was brave to be here and to present in a very broad audience, not related to his where he belongs. And now you will introduce yourself, of course. This is the best. So I'm very happy that you accept, and I hope that it will work. So the idea is that now Giovanni will present himself, who he is, and so on. And there is an arena. So he is the speaker. So he has to answer the question that you have probably, I hope, read in the announcement. What is the question of his research? Why should we care? What are the results of what research is needed to do to prove it? What would be the consequences of the results, if there are any results? How could we move forward? So the idea is that he has about roughly 10 minutes of presentation, and then I will moderate this session, and everybody can, talk and discuss. I hope it will be fun. So Giovanni, please introduce yourself, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Caterina. Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm a dermatologist, an academic dermatologist in the University of Milan. And my main interests here are immune-mediated diseases, endotypes, but at the end of the day, precision medicine. My final objective is, by the understanding of a pathogenetic mechanism, come up with a therapy that can, at the end of the day, end up in improvement in terms of quality of life of the patient and stop the pathogenetic mechanism capable to trigger the disease. So briefly, what is an immune-mediated disease? An immune-mediated disease is a disease in which the dysfunction of immunity is capable to trigger and maintain a pathogenetic situation. That is a very broad definition in which we can find from lupus, systemic lupus, to psoriasis, to atopic dermatitis. And the concept of endotypes, the concept of endotypes is mirroring an evolution in terms of therapy conception, because before the physicians treat the disease evaluating the phenotype, so the cluster of characteristics, in the clinical characteristics and basic lab characteristics, such as a blood exam, for example, in order to try to guess what will be the best drug in order to have the higher efficacy and lower amount of side effects. Then precision medicine have as a name understanding at the beginning the fingerprint of a disease and how a patient with the same disease is different from the other one. Understanding this difference, you can address one therapy or another one that is more adherent to his or her biology. Okay, with this introduction, let's start the challenging of the questions. Okay. 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 Thank you very much. This is my first question. What is the question? At the beginning, it's worthy. I try to guess what is the question. Are we building real disease endotypes or endotypes of the current status of the disease? This is a tricky question, but the concept behind that is really easy. Are we doing like a snapshot of the disease at the moment, and we categorize what kind of vision, what kind of picture we are evaluating, or it's a picture of the inside of the disease, of how the disease really works. This is very important in terms of how we can approach to the endotype, because in one case, this is functional to say what therapy I can use at the moment. In the other case, it will be very important in order to understand what kind of drug I can use in order to achieve a remission of a chronic disease. So let's think to the magnitude of this question in terms of patient quality of life or even patient life. So the first challenge is not because before UV and Liverpool, but is between phenotype and endotype. At the moment, the therapy is chosen based on endotypes, and so the information that the physician can, at the moment, in a real life setting, achieve easily. So by visiting the patient, signs, symptoms, and basic clinical lab. At the end of the day, looking critically at the literature, a lot of endotypes start to come up, but how they can be comparable. And if I change the setting of my patient, these endotypes still will work? That's a really tricky question, because there's some biases in sampling, for example, because our body works together in terms of tissues, systems, and even cells, following some rules. And the first one is the circadian rhythm. For example, if I'm sampling a patient with psoriasis in the morning, in the afternoon, in the evening, we can face an intra-individual variability that can compromise how the machine learning is setting the cluster of patients that we call endotype. But also the choice of the correct statistics, unconventional statistics, could be challenging, because with deep learning, our system, our artificial neural network is learning, and it can come up with different endotype setting. Furthermore, also in order to evaluate and deeply understand what are the main drivers of these endotypes, also data are really important. And data availability is central in this operation. Sometimes it's not present in literature, sometimes we are not available. And that could be a big challenge in terms of replicability. Another important aspect is how applicable are the endotype of today to the dynamics of the disease in the future, or even in the near future, because that can change the therapeutical approach very deeply, and we will understand why. Why should we care? That's the hard one. I wanted to post a picture of one of my favorite sculptures that are Rodin. And with this sentence, I think he plenty express the tension that us as a scientist we experience while we are facing a problem. He say he doesn't think only with his brain, but with every muscle in his arms, back and legs, with clenched fists and tense toes. So, why we have to care? Phenotypes do not necessarily relate or give insights in the pathogenetic mechanism. That imply that what we can see perhaps is lying to us in terms of pathogenetic mechanism, because clinics can manifest similarly to different diseases can manifest similarly. So what we can see is not what can be. Second, in precision medicine, the gold standard is endotype based, because precision medicine have the aim to decompress the complexity and arrive to a single decision in terms of therapy. At the moment, with endotypes, is not univocal, the interpretation. Endotyping is expensive because you have to go beyond what is normally and validated, what is normally cheap. You have to use more resources in terms of money, in terms of time, and in terms of skills to the people that is doing that and is integrating that and is translating the integration into a clinical, meaningful action. Okay, endotypes-driven therapy represent the gold standard for precision medicine, but how to arrive is still challenging. Why should we care? Because the healthcare systems is facing the challenge to an increased burden of diseases, but a decreased burden of available resources. So rationalize the use of the resources and have a real evidence-based medicine for new expensive drugs is the first objective at the moment, to let our healthcare system survive. What are the results, if there are any? Okay, for acute diseases such as sepsis, results are great. Results are really great, because endotyping is like do a picture of the disease at that time point. So it can be easily translated to a therapy that can solve the critical problem at the moment. So pretty good. Chronic diseases, that's the difficulty, that's the real challenge, because endotyping and doing endotype-driven therapy, in the very short term, pretty good. In the long term, sometimes disappointing, because the disease is not something that is isolated, is under like a glass bell, but is something that continuously interact with the inside and with the outside. And so that's why endotyping at a certain time point is not a guarantee of have a response to the endotype-driven therapy in the long term. So what is really, why is really important an endotype? I will try to respond, because the patient journey is a trajectory. And in literature, the behavior of the scientists at the moment is like cluster a patient at the beginning in an endotype and try to justify this change of trajectory that differs from one patient to the other one as sub-endotypes. But at the end of the day, with doing these sub-endotypes, we are failing the first aim of precision medicine. So give a drug that can really solve the problem. Endotypes is changing, as I said, because we are a biological system interact with the inside and the outside. And at the moment, the most virtuous scientists use a therapy that is endotypes driven at the beginning and phenotype driven during maintenance. So basically, we are having like a good knowledge at the beginning, but during the therapy, we are doing what we are doing right now, what we were doing before precision medicine. So is it really worth to spend so much money? What would be the consequences? I love Matrix, and because it's challenging, very, very practical our problem. So the first scenario, the red one, will be target therapies endotype driven is changing only the disease endotype. So we are milding signs and symptoms. Okay, the second scenario I think is really intriguing for the knowledge that can change. Target therapy endotype driven is changing the disease, and we can talk about the remission in chronic disease. So let's analyze deeper the first scenario. Target therapy are symptomatic, and that is not so comforting us. The objective is to let the chronic disease remain dormant, so increase the time between one flare to the other one, not so promising in terms of long-term quality of life of our patients. But we are talking about chronic patient, and if the dormancy of the disease started to be less frequent, our patients have a higher possibility to lose the response to those expensive target therapies and became resistant because the disease is changing all the time. And so we are facing the real big problem of bigger and bigger groups of multi-failure patients with all the pharmacoeconomical situation behind. Let's face the other scenarios. We are fighting, but we are fighting effectively because we are changing the pathogenesis of the disease. We are changing the history of the disease. The objective of the treatment starts to be the remission, so the absence of the disease. So also the concept of chronicity in medicine is really changing as it happened with the hepatitis C virus infection. So something is chronic until we find a way to treat it. That is challenging the concept, the physiopathological concept. So target may be stopped after achieving remission. So it's not something lifelong. How could we move forward? Last but not least, scenario first. So we are doing symptoms and sign decrease. Therapy endotype-driven and phenotype-driven maintenance, it will be important in order to move toward an endotype that is less damageful in the long term for our patient. In the second scenario, when we are cutting the pathogenic mechanism, the endotype-driven therapy is important, but we have to check the endotype in a phenotype behavior way. And we need to validate strategy to move faster to the disease remission. But how can we move from one side to endotype, milder endotype, and from the other side to a remission? Because we are not alone. There's not only the inside. there's also the outside. So we need to analyze the exposures. And the exposome, that is the omics that try to cluster all the exposures that are meaningful in terms of a disease for an organism, is a new scenario. And I want to open up the discussion with this sentence with one of my favorite writers, American writers, that say, the land belongs to its owners, but the landscape belongs to those who know how to appreciate it. Thank you very much for the attention.
Yes.
Sit there.
Okay, open the discussion. Can you switch on the light? Okay, I hope it was an interesting challenge. I thank you so much. It was very interesting. Yes, stop sharing. I opened the discussion. I have several, but I just want the people here maybe have some. Thierry, I see you. I see you.
Trying to process it.
Okay. Need processing. Okay. Stefano, go ahead.
Just for us not trained in medicine, can you explain in simple terms how an endotype differs from a phenotype?
Phenotype, yes, I was sure. You were asking.
Let's put it this way. Can you make an example of a phenotype and an endotype?
Okay, very good.
One disease.
So psoriasis, you see the plaques. You see the plaques. If you do the blood test, there's some inflammatory index that is higher, some blood exams that are not okay. If you cluster those characteristics, what you can see and you can analyze easier with the daily practice, this is a phenotype. Easily, yes, exactly.
Yes.
In a visit, in a normal visit, what I can see and integrate with some lab information. The endotype imply three main fields. Structural biology, so second, third level examination, omics, and every information that you possibly have. So it's something that is not fully explained, but what you see and the blood exam that you have daily from the patient. So, for example, you can understand why you can estimate the risk of a patient with psoriasis that may develop in 4 years also psoriatic arthritis. With an endotype, you cluster this group of patients at the beginning, and you do follow-up stricter in order to.
Okay, but going back to the question. So,
no, in other words.
So, can I say if I understood? So, phenotype is a set of measurements that you do on a patient based on the symptoms he has. So
signs, symptoms.
But endotypes is also all the other measurements you can do that are maybe not related, that you wouldn't do because they're not related to that particular sequence. But they might be important.
No, they are related to the pathogenesis, to try to understand the biological fingerprint of the disease in this patient, in the patient that you have in front of.
I try to explain. Oh, please, Paolo.
Yes, they were right. I understood. I'm totally expecting what the field. If I understood it correctly, endotype is like an observable, whereas
phenotype.
Phenotype is like an observable, whereas endotype is the actual pathogenesis that you don't know, and you want to try to deduce from what you see.
Basically, every information that you can achieve will be integrated with machine learning. Try to cherry pick the one that are really meaningful for the disease of the patient that you have in front of. Also, the one that you don't think that are plausible. For example, before was not even thinkable that if a patient drink more alcohol, get a flare with higher severity. But now we saw the science improved, and we have evidence-based medicine that say that drinking a lot of alcohol will increase the number of flares and the severity of these ones.
Let me do it in more simplification. If you just know that the patient has cough,
Yeah.
there is a thing, right?
Yeah.
But from that, you cannot almost deduce anything about its actual pathogenics.
Correct.
Because cough can be due to a lot of possible pathogens.
Yeah.
So you will have to do different measurements. Probably you will start from the most discriminating ones.
Yes.
They try to discriminate the pathogenics, and you go on until you think you know what is the actual patient.
Exactly. Yeah.
So to me, a computer scientist is like trying to get a latent variable from an observed variable. You have a mechanism that produces observable from latent. You want to cure the latent without knowing it, and you must reduce it in some way with something from the observable.
Correct.
Exactly.
Thank you very much.
Just to tell you, Stefano, what we do is endotype. Most of the time, we don't care about phenotype. For us, phenotypes is something different. For the scientists, well, you see, is a different. But what we analyze is endotype.
Yeah.
Davide.
So I want to do another example to, if I understood. So, for example, if you take patients with the COVID, there are some of them that develop long-term conditions, and those long-term conditions can only be inferred with the endotype.
Yes, correct. Because endotype, you could predict, for example, and now clinical outcomes such as you can do response to a therapy, hospitalization, or development or another complication. You can there's two ways to see endotype. One in terms of predicting, so that you use endotype to understand and to try to guess what will be the dynamic of the disease. And the other concept is statistical. At that moment, the two patients that I see that have the same disease on the skin, for example, are they different? There's something that can influence my decision to establish a therapy that I can't address with only my eyes and the few blood exams that I have daily. This is the why is important.
Mm-hmm. So yes, really, now you metabolize.
One is simply how much nowadays this approach based on endotypes is scalable, and I mean, you told us as we can guess, it's quite expensive, and how much, I mean, in terms of research, of course, it's worth looking to the future, but nowadays,
are you using it?
Okay.
It is already there in the clinic, or
I can respond you in two steps. First, the cost of endotype is related to how much detailed precise information and techniques you are using. First. Second, how much you want to invest to integrate, because choosing the correct deep learning more and more powerful can guarantee me a higher accuracy and basically can guarantee me a higher possibility to have success. Also, if in machine learning, the terms of possibility is not correct. And why it will be worth going on this street? Because when you arrive to validate some set of biomarkers to cluster some patients, those biomarkers could be important to be checked at the beginning to see what kind of drug, because we are talking about a drug that is 3K per week for the whole life. 3,000 euros per week for all life.
It's not very expensive.
Yeah, in chronic patients.
Chronic patients.
And there's a lot of patients that after long term do not respond. So the switch is terribly expensive because you have to start the initiation of the therapy where you have to use more doses at the beginning to achieve a certain dosage in the blood. So it means a lot of money and used for 3 months. And you have to wait those 3 months without knowing if it will work. The patient will increase his or her severity. So there's a cost that could related to the pharmacoeconomy and the cost that is related to the biology of the patient. The patient, if the patient with psoriasis develops psoriatic arthritis, this joint will never come back in terms of integrity. So we are talking about a long-term, a lifelong disability.
Please.
I think it was scenario 2 when you told us that.
I hope that will be scenario 2. I really.
Yeah, I mean, there was a co-evolution of the disease along the cure of the disease.
The remission or the other one?
I think it was remission.
The remission, okay. So.
And I was wondering if, I mean, this endotyping was successful somehow along this timeline. So you will use by endotyping, you get some information, you cure it, but then you see that the body, adapting and again, endotype is useful along this treatment to guide the treatment.
Okay. I mean, in the scenario 2, where you postulate that the target therapy is capable to let you achieve the remission, so the stop of the disease. After that, you are healthy. Otherwise, the strategy that we are thinking is to endotype to a certain time point, and this time point will be imposed by the phenotype, so what I see. Because if start once and get worse, now I endotype again, because I see clinical that is worse. Because I hypothesized that the endotype is changed and influence the clinical evident manifestations. So I have to endotype again, and in this way, we are able, with higher cost in the short term, of course, to achieve a remission. In the other scenario, for example, you endotype once, and then you use the same approach that we are using today, the cheap one about the phenotype. Okay, the skin is clear, and there's no evident manifestation. Let's wait that other manifestation come up for changing something. How you can translate that? The price of the body in the scenario of the remission. The price that have biological to pay the body is extremely low, but the price is extremely high. In the first scenario, the one that you are modeling endotypes, the price is low, is very, very marginal, but the price that in the long term the body have biologically to pay is crazy high, because the disability will end up in a long-term higher cost of this person, beside the loss of the quality of life, permanent.
So probably the cost of, I don't know, the drugs, of the maintenance. No?
Yeah, the complications.
So, I have another question, just general. What will happen to the medical doctors? I mean, the profession of medical, because imagine that now endotypes is working and everything is settled. What will happen to your profession? You're a medical doctor, so how's changing actually? Do you see any change will happen in the future?
Of course, some changes are mandatory in terms of culture or what is a chronic disease. Because in both scenarios, the idea of chronic disease will change. We have to start to think that the chronicity is chronic inflammation, okay, but that part will remain, but the long term will change. We will have acute and chronic changes very, very, very clear, but will be therapy driven. Because at the moment we are treating some diseases that before we never think will be lifelong, okay, there's nothing to do. So from one part it will be the culture. To the second one, for the first time, we as doctors, as scientists, we will really practically and pragmatically influence the drug discovery. We will accelerate the drug discovery, and the doctor will have a biggest armamentarium to use in case of unsuccess of a certain drug. Because at the moment, for certain diseases, such as psoriasis, we are antagonizing 3-4 mechanisms. For atopic dermatitis, we are antagonizing one mechanism with a lot of drugs. And the dynamics, how to choose another drug when you fail, is not validated, is crazy empirical. And that will implement only the possibility to increase statistically the pharmacoeconomical expenses. Third will be a change in a multidisciplinary evaluation of the disease, because the more and more, not only it will be important the integration with the colleagues in terms of multidisciplinarity, but the multidisciplinarity will expand also in other branches of the science, such as the physics, such as the bioinformatics, such as a psychologist, because also both physician and patient will have to process. Because if you say, okay, you have an endotype, that it will increase the risk to have a stroke. Also, the management of the information, the processing of information, and the management of the information from the patient point of view and from the physician point of view will be extremely more difficult and need a proper address.
Mm-hmm. And I was also, other question, just the last one, I was also wondering, nowadays, what is the big challenge in dermatologists? I mean, the big challenge, the one that really...
The big challenge, chronic diseases.
The chronic diseases.
Chronic diseases. Yes. If you think that
there are many and increasing over time, that's also one reason. Okay.
And because
you don't know what to do. Maybe.
Exactly, yeah. And the target therapy is targeting one molecule, not a pathway. One molecule inside the pathway. Mm-hmm. The concept is different because it was really fantastic because we comes from, for example, for immune-mediated diseases, to a reality where we use indiscriminate immunosuppression to mild the disease, to stop the disease, to achieve a decrease of the flares. Now we arrive to have less side effects, but targeting only one drug, only one molecule, pro-inflammatory molecule. But the future will be stop the pathogen, the pathway. Mm-hmm. And now we are not achieving this. That will be the big challenge.
I see. So, of course, you are a medical doctor, so you have to cure the patient. So you have a problem in front of you and you have to deal with this. But thinking about prevention, so since a chronic disease, now we can do something. How do you see this? What will be the big challenge of our society, Western or Eastern countries? It's different, I guess.
There's a big difference. There's a difference in seasonality. Mm-hmm. There's a different that have a bigger implication also in the disease, because some autoimmune diseases have a seasonality, some are not. But the melting pot will open up a new scenario and will open the Pandora vase of our poor knowledge of certain ethnic groups. Mm. For example, genome-wide association studies in Africa are available only for Egypt and Tunisia and Algeria. For the other part of Africa, we don't know nothing. And seeing in the future the changes of dynamics, genetical dynamics in terms of migration will open up a new scenario in which, for example, some drugs are more effective by certain group and some are on the other group. Think to the polymorphism of interleukin-17, how various are in the Asian population. If we compare to the European one. For example, from the literature, we see that African people have lower prevalence of psoriasis, but of a higher severity. How can it be possible? What we know, very few. And we need to address this gap in knowledge, because in 50 years, our society will shape differently from what is now. And in order to be prepared, we need to fill those gaps.
How do you deal the environment? It means just a simple thing, stress. Everybody is stressed.
Okay.
And there is psoriasis, seems to have a lot of link with stress. How do you deal with this? So in the society is...
We open up a very big bracket, because stress is not so quantifiable in terms of immunology. So we decided to neglect this aspect. But with the concept of exposure, it pops up in terms of different exposure or a frequency of those exposures. That I think is challenging. It will be very good for the patients. Say, if you decrease the stress, you will get better. But at the end of the day, we are selling something not evidence-based, that we at ourselves, we are not sure that we'll have some insights. Of course, the patient will be happy or will be less unhappy. But our effort in medicine, as in science, is talk wisely in evidence-based way. So the stress should be defined better, because something exists around this big cloud of foggy concepts. But in the future, we have to have at least a definition.
The definition, because
how we measure stress.
Well,
of course, we all know what is stress, but can I say I have a stress of 10 or I have a stress of 7?
Neurologically, yes. Yes, neurologically you can see an impact. So there are some.
The oxidative stress is miserable, because we know the biomarkers. But the mental stress, or for example, stressors, in terms when you do like mouse work, there are some protocols that can create the stress. Basically, they have like a proto definition of a big perturbation of the daily exposures that lead to a change in the functionality of the animal. That
is not much.
If I can say, I have myself a chronic disease, which is
okay.
Job.
So I can measure the stress the other way around, because when I see that it worsens, I know that I'm stressed.
Okay.
So I mean,
you see a correlation.
There is a correlation. And even if I cannot measure stress, I can see when my dermatitis worsens, and not always.
That is intriguing, actually, because
that you are, now enrolled in a study.
Because the sebum, the sebum in the sebaceous glands is under control of the peripheral nervous system. And the peripheral nervous system is capable to have a different reprogramming of those sebaceous glands, increasing the sebum part and decrease the water part. by doing that, the dynamic of the sebum release or also the magnitude of microbiome changes differ a lot and can create a pro-inflammatory environment. From this perspective, I can say that that's a more understandable link with our actual knowledge.
You know that we have an algorithm for microbiome, very unique, me and Stefano. We publish with also Matteo and other students is not here. That would be nice, interesting link. We could use the algorithm to measure the stress in this in the skin. This is thinking about.
Although I should say that 2 years ago they finally found something that works for me, and now practically
Yeah, but also this is interesting to see why it works. I mean, no, it's
or cover up the phenotype.
Cover up. Don't tell him. No,
yeah. But that means that actually you are not really changing your phenotype. You are only covering up the phenotype. That is really interesting because leads to the further confirm the idea of the skin type. Not the skin type in terms of sun, but the skin type in terms of behavior and interaction with the environment. If you think that the microbiome composed by bacteria, viruses, whatever, is not only a blanket, but is something that actually acts like as a filter in both directions. Yeah. You can understand why, if you don't recondition your blanket, you'll never are able to have cold when there's sun and warm when there's cold outside.
Yeah, because the goal of our algorithm is not just to give you, the list of the microbes that are inside, the easy peasy. No, we infer the metabolic pathway. So we know what is the release. So what is this interaction? That is what he's saying. That's interesting. Okay. Other question, please.
Certainly these many developments depend on how much data are available. So I was wondering how much the community is ready to share data and if there are protocols.
Okay. Let's go more technical. At the beginning, if you want to cultivate, because or nursing an artificial neural network, the first should be the data input. There are some programs that can multiply the data input, because if there's no available samples, and that is really interesting. At the moment, we have big data, but the problem of big data sometimes is how they are cropped all together, and further consideration is that, for example, there was a Nature paper that that challenged the idea of dysbiosis. What is a dysbiosis? Okay, something that is different, a status that is different from the status of the control. I think that they are healthy. Okay, good. But microbiome is something alive. So it was demonstrated recently that the colon, the microbiome have oscillations in terms of kind of microbes present and in terms of metabolism. So they say that dysbiosis is the loss of this cycle of this circadian cycle. To respond to you, there's a difference. There's a very big difficulty in integrating big data and to feed your ongoing algorithms with those data.
But at least they are open.
The open access available, yes, because you think that NIH, you have to release the data that you produce with NIH funding. So at least the American one are okay. There's the GEO one references, and more high level journals require that the database is publicly available for transparency.
Yeah, not maybe immediately, but after a while. Usually they said
embargo time.
Exactly. So, okay.
Still find more requests to.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Goodbye. Yeah. Okay. More questions, doubts? Please.
I'm from physics background, so please correct me if I'm wrong. Is it possible, like, if there is a certain disease with some certain phenotype, it can have like different endotypes?
Yes.
Is the other way around possible?
Yes, that's why I put all these different views of phenotype and endotype, because we started to see that patients that have a clinically evident psoriasis, after you treat them for psoriasis with target therapies, they start to don't respond. If you do a biopsy, it will be atopic dermatitis that is clinically very different from psoriasis. So there's also these cases, but many more, because we don't do biopsy to all patients unless it's mandatory, or we don't understand why they are not answering to respond to those drugs. That's actually why we are going to the endotypes, because we understand and we have the Socratic knowledge we know that we don't know. That's why endotypes are getting more and more into the medicine.
But is it possible, like, some disease with endotypes can have different phenotypes depending upon, like, immune response of person?
Yes, that's why. And why this response suddenly changed. That's the why that we are looking for. Very good question.
I see. Other question? Doubts? Okay, it was a challenge. Okay, you learned something. Okay, thank you so much. Thanks a lot. And see you at the next one.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
Thank you. Ciao Massimo. Bye. Bye off. Probably.
Ciao, grazie di tutto, molto
Grazie
interessante.
molte. Ciao.
Ciao.
Grazie di aver partecipato. This is
And
no, but it's not